Awesome. Well, so welcome guys to our September session. It's crazy to think that we are barely in October already with this crazy year. Today, I think we have a very interesting meetup where we have two guest speakers spread across the country. We were commenting about this just a few minutes ago, how a silver lining with the whole COVID situation was that we could expand our local KC Tug to embrace speakers from different areas. So we'll have Roshni today talking about usability testing, and also Christopher um, and Vince discussing how they use. It's a kind of a series that we're trying to follow of real world Tableau, if you will. We want to see how we talk a lot about theories and tips, but how do people actually use? How does it benefit them on their day to day? And they're going to talk about their specific use cases with the Carolina hurricanes. So excited to hear that. And as a message to anybody out in the community, we're always looking for speakers. So if you're ever interested in showcasing how you guys use Tableau, or if you have something that you would like to share with a wider audience, reach out to us. We would love to have you. Still on that note, these meetings are done for you guys. So if there's any topics that you would like to hear more about, whether it's Tableau desktop, server, data dev, tips, best, I mean, anything, we're always open for feedback so that we can improve these meetings for you guys. So just one point that I wanted to mention. Aaron did steal my thunder a little bit talking about Tableau Conference a few minutes ago, but just a quick reminder, Tableau Conference will be here very soon. It's creeping up on us for the Americas, November 9 through 11. If you haven't registered already, make sure you do. Lots of great content. If you've been to a conference before, you know what I'm talking about. If you haven't, this is a great opportunity, especially with it being completely free. So don't let it go. There will be recordings as well. You can always follow back later, but it's always nice to attend. And then my other community update that I wanted to talk about, spend a quick minute and brag about our KC Tug. The class of ambassadors for 2021 has just been announced, and we are privileged to have three of them amongst us. So Sean Miller, no introduction necessary. He's one of our founding fathers here within the KC Tug. He was, again, I believe, nominated social ambassador. Big one for Aaron. As a user group ambassador, I believe this was a first for Aaron. So great stuff there. Congratulations, Aaron. And also Jeff James, who has been a speaker and very involved here with the KC Tug. He was nominated on the Data Dev ambassador class. So just a quick mention to some of our own here from our KC Tug. So good stuff happening around that I wanted you guys to be aware of. And with that said, a few housekeeping items for today's presentations. If you have any questions, feel free to use the Q&A section. We'll monitor those and pass them along to the panelists. And that's about it. So with that, I will take a step back and let our presenters run the show today. So Roshni, floor is yours.
All right, and I hope you guys can see my screen. Hopefully, maybe, yes.
Yeah, it looks great.
Awesome. Okay, so as Lucas said, my name is Roshni, and I am I'm a data analyst at MIT. So while I live in Massachusetts, I actually want to plug some Kansas and Missouri connections. Um, so during second grade, I lived in Wichita, and Wichita is where I first learned the benefit of tracking data, and that how you display data can impact outcomes. So my elementary school in second grade participated in the Book It program through Pizza Hut. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that, but basically you track your reading, and for every X number of books you read, you earn a personal pan pizza through Pizza Hut. And for me, it wasn't just about blogging the reading. We also had to do a book report, and that book report had to have an illustration. So data viz sort of. But that program sort of introduced me to two positive sort of like lifelong outcomes. One, a love for Nancy Drew novels, and second, that addiction to Pizza Hut pan pizza. And hands down, the pizza I've had in Kansas City and Missouri beats New York, Chicago deep dish, any of those other lame pizzas elsewhere in the world. I We can fight about this later, Chris. Um, any other pizza you can throw, toss, or roll out, nah, Pizza Hut personal pan pizzas, it's the way to go. Anyway, so I work in an MIT's Resource Development Department, or advancement, and that's just a fancy way of saying fundraising. And I'm going to talk to you about how usability testing Tableau dashboards can help you build better products for your users, which can lead to more successful outcomes. So, fundraisers are like salespeople. They have a portfolio of prospective donors, like sales leads, and they have annual fundraising goals. We were tasked with building something in Tableau to help fundraisers and their managers manage these portfolios and monitor their performance. And we call it the Fundraiser Portfolio Tool, or FPT. This is the first of many acronyms. I'm sorry, that's just how I roll. um, so when we started building FPT, we had Tableau for years, like literally probably 2014 or so is when we got FPT, or sorry, got Tableau, and this was 2017, 18 when we started thinking about building. But the fact was that Tableau was still a new product for many of our users. We had assumed on past projects that, filters and charts and all of that stuff that is quintessentially Tableau would be intuitive to our users. But it turned out that it often wasn't. And this project was the most visible thing that we had built. It had the widest audience. So we wanted to make sure that we were on the right track as we built the workbook, that we were building the right product. And that's how we started doing usability testing for our Tableau dashboards. So what is usability testing? So what I found is normally when I say usability testing, data and IT folks, they'll hear user acceptance testing or user testing. But that's not quite right. So user acceptance testing, or UAT, is more or less functionality testing. So does it meet whatever specs we set out to meet at the beginning of the project? Maybe we refine them, but still, does it meet the specs? Is it performant? Do extracts refresh in an acceptable time? Does the data load and refresh quickly when you filter? And you also validate, is the data right? Are all the knobs and switches working right? Basically, does it work? And that's more or less what we had done in the past. We built the product right. But on past projects, we later learned that users weren't digging what we'd built. Features went unused, they were too complicated, the projects just weren't useful, and they didn't help users achieve their goals. So while we had asked, does it work? We didn't ask, does it work for our users? We hadn't built the right product. So that's how we started doing usability testing. It became part of our user testing process. So in usability testing, you observe users performing real tasks as they would do with the final product, and it attempts to get at three things. First, is what we're building intuitive and easy to use? And if it's not easy to use from the get-go, is it easy for people to learn how to use? So maybe they don't get it the first or second time, but by the third time, they know exactly what to do, exactly where to go, and what to expect on the other side. Does it help users reach their goals? Not can the product help them reach their goals, but do users actually succeed when trying to use the tool to reach their goals? And then finally, do users actually want to use it? If it's something that's so painful to use that they'll actively avoid using it, that's not really a usable product. So usability testing is all about building the right product. And it's something that's done all the time for websites and mobile apps. Is it easy to log in, to buy a product, to find something on the site or in the app? It's also used with physical products. Does this coffee maker have the right buttons in the right place? Is the filter easy to use and replace? So back before I moved into fundraising, I worked in the MIT libraries, and that was where I was first introduced to usability testing. Our web team, which later morphed into a user experience or UX team, tested various elements of the library's website, from search tools to subject guides, using a variety of usability evaluation methods, including usability testing. I was also the subject, or a participant on a project where the university was rolling out a new form for textbook submissions that was also going to feed into our library course reserves. And that experience kind of made me look at usability testing from the opposite viewpoint. Instead of being part of the testing team, being a subject, and it made me realize that what we do when usability testing can really help build or kill enthusiasm for a product. So my first test that I actually helped plan wasn't for a website, though. It was instead for the library's physical spaces. We called it Patron for a Day, PFAD, because again, MIT loves its acronyms. And the intent behind the project was to help library staff empathize with our patrons or our users by walking in their shoes, doing basic things like finding materials in the stacks or using technology like book scanners. This physical usability test uncovered a bunch of usability issues: inconsistent or non-existent signage in instructions. Materials were arranged differently, by title versus by call number in each library, and just a whole bunch of other weird things that if you were someone who went to more than one library, which many of our patrons did, you would easily get confused about what to expect on the other side. So as a result of this testing, not only did we, yes, help people empathize with our users, but we also came up with a bunch of changes to spaces and signage that they weren't just based on opinions, they were actually grounded and prioritized based on what we actually observed or what our users observed in the space. And it was this evidence-based technique that sort of stuck in my head as we worked through the requirements for the fundraiser portfolio tool. So we did focus groups and surveys and worked through a variety of prototypes. And they helped us hone in on what metrics were important, how people manage their portfolios and their staff. And we ended up having to sort of rethink everything completely based on these focus groups and surveys. And we also got the benefit of having a larger project team as a result of this idea that, yeah, this is going to be a larger project. We ended up adding some business users, not actual fundraisers, but people who work with the fundraisers and sort of help guide them through policy and process. And we started discussing redesign ideas with this larger group. We had conversation after conversation where people were, spouting opinions about how things should be laid out, what charts to use, what filters to show, what words to use on the page. And if I could only tell you how many times and ways I tried to shut down the traffic light color scheme, so many. The problem was that we still didn't know which ideas would stick with our users, because the bottom line is that we are not our users. But we need to understand how they work. How are they interpreting the charts we're showing them? How are they actually interacting with the filters and all the other controls that are there in Tableau? And we need to sort of understand how they work to confirm our design choices or to revise and test again in an iterative build process. And so all I could think about during these conversations about traffic lights is that if usability testing could be applied to websites and even physical spaces, and you have no idea how insane it is, how political people get about signage changes in the library. But we were able to actually have a grounded discussion around signage changes. If we could do that, then why couldn't we apply it to Tableau dashboards? They're web-based on the server. They're interactive tools with buttons just like regular websites, and they have filters, like coffee makers. And sometimes they need some navigational help, just like library spaces. And hey, look, that's sort of like a Tableau dashboard. You've got your filters, you've got your navigation. And yeah, there we go. We have our Tableau workbook. So how do we conduct usability testing? There are a ton of resources out on the web about you doing usability testing, how to conduct it, how to analyze results, and so on. And I've listed some examples here, and I'll be pasting a bunch of links in the chat near the end of my presentation. These sources are generally geared towards web usability, and the basics are actually pretty much the same regardless of what it is you're testing, whether you're testing a website, a mobile app, a physical product, or a Tableau dashboard. So I'm going to cover those basics, but I'm also going to give you some caveats to think about as you're working with data products, because there are some things that you kind of need to be a little bit more finicky about. So our goal in any usability testing is to observe about 5 representative users as they attempt to perform specific tasks in the tool, to see what needs fixing. So we ask the user to think aloud as they go through the task so we can understand why they clicked on something, what they were expecting, how they're interpreting terminology or charts. And we stress that we're testing the product, not them. You can do no wrong. And we want them to be open and honest. You can't hurt our feelings. This, we set the stage with these sort of this list of this is what we expected to happen, and that generally tends to work. People are honest with us about what they're seeing and what they're experiencing. But we in order to start testing, we actually have to plan it, right? We need to create a script or a guide for the test, and we'll look at a sample script in pieces in just a few minutes. But there is a process to writing the script. So first, we want to identify what we want to test. So what is the goal of the dashboard? What should the user be able to accomplish on it or with it? What are we not sure about on this dashboard? Is there terminology or is there a chart that we're not sure that people will get or that they'll be able to actually interact with? Are there filters that we're not sure that should be included or should be excluded? what do we want to learn from our users? Is there something about the process or policy or even terminology that we're wondering about, or about how they will use the dashboard? What context will they use it in? Will they use it as part of their monthly reporting? Will they use it as they're trying to, close up invoices or something like that? Like where will they actually use the dashboard? And then for all of these things that we've identified, we then want to write a handful of realistic, actionable task scenarios based on those goals. So, incorporate as many of those testing goals as you can. And writing the task is kind of the biggest, like these two steps are kind of the biggest part of this whole process. It's going to be the part that takes the most effort in terms of just like sitting down and thinking through what are the goals, and how would they actually walk through this dashboard to achieve those goals. You want to make sure that you include a mix of easy, medium, and hard tasks. You don't want to just overload them with hard stuff and just make the user want to stop or quit early on in the test. But you don't want to just throw a bunch of softballs at them, and then not actually learn anything that you want to learn about. So having a mix of easy, medium, and hard kind of gives you that best of both worlds. And it also, sometimes things that we think are easy are going to end up being a real pain for the user. So it's good to have some of those things that we think are softballs in there. The script also has an intro and a closing, and we'll look again at both of those in a bit too. So you have the what you're testing. You then need the who. So you start by figuring out who your testing team is. We generally try to have at least one facilitator and one note taker as separate roles. The facilitator is the one with the script. They're the one who keeps the testing going. They ask the questions. They ask follow-up questions as needed. The note taker takes notes, and they're not taking verbatim notes. They're sort of taking the high level, like, oh, they got tripped up by this. They went to this thing instead of where we expected them to go. And they make other they take notes on other comments the user might make as they're working through the test. There are times when we've had one person play both facilitator and note taker, and it's possible, and lots of people do it. I personally hate it. If you can get a second note or a separate note taker, it can make the whole process a lot less stressful. And you also get that second set of eyes to sort of keep track of things that you might have forgotten to write down, as if you're also playing the facilitator role. The next thing you need is some testers. You need to test the test before you roll it out with real people. Testing the test helps you do two things. First, it makes sure that the script is good, that it flows, it covers everything it's supposed to cover, and it fits within the time frame. It's not too long, it's not too short. But it also gives moderators and note takers some practice, not only with the dashboard, but also with the test, so that they know what to expect at certain points in the test. And then finally, you can't do a user test without users. So we generally schedule for for 5 users, plus or minus, or actually usually plus a couple more, because people do drop out. But the idea of 5 users has sort of been it's a topic in usability research. Some people say 5 is not enough. Some people say 5 is too much. And there's a bit of nuance there. So law of diminishing return says that after you've hit a certain number of users, you're going to find fewer and fewer big issues, even if you test 100 more users. And so that's why we tend to go with 3 to 5 users of each type of user. So if we have a tool that has a different set of, fundraisers are going to use it one way, managers are going to use it a different way, we'll probably get 3 to 5 fundraisers, 3 to 5 managers, for a total of at least 5 people, so, usually well under 10. But the idea, you're not going to ever find all of the usability issues in a dashboard or in anything that you're testing. And even if you did find them all, you're never going to fix every single issue, because you will just keep uncovering new ones if you keep testing. So sticking to a small number, 3 to 5 users of each type, helps you identify the biggest issues, because those are the ones that are going to come up first, and they're going to come up repeatedly. And if you happen to have more time and more people to test the second time, get your issues, fix what you can, and then test, use your extra set of users to test again and see if you actually successfully fixed those issues, or if there's other big issues that you probably also want to fix, but that may have been hidden underneath those first time high use ones. And one of the other things to think about when you're doing usability testing with data products, especially, is that you really need to get real potential users of the product. In regular usability testing with a website, you can always just pull someone off the street and say, hey, do you ever book a trip online? Well, let me tell you, we have this new tool that we're testing for how to book a travel thing on the internet. Well, you're going to find lots of people who travel. So picking a random person off the street will probably get you someone who is part of your user base. But on a data product, it's a lot harder. You actually want people who are actually going to use the dashboard, especially in a business environment. So, when we do dashboards that have words like solicitation plan on them, we know that our fundraisers will get what that means, but we also know that our IT folks who support the fundraisers probably won't. They're not in that part of the business. So it's, for us, it's not even get someone in the department. It's get someone who's actually in this role that actually deals with this data. And the other part of it is, if you're doing metrics, especially like human or person metrics, if you're building a dashboard to help someone with their own metrics, maybe actually have some of their own metrics in the dashboard, because if they're asked about metrics that don't matter to them, that don't have any real impact on their day-to-day or their weekly or their monthly or what have you, they're not really going to engage in the dashboard in the same way as someone who does actually have to deal with those metrics does. So 5 representative users for data dashboards really means 5 real future or even current users. Anyway, so we have all of our resources. We've got our guide, our script, we've got our people. We then have to conduct the tests. And there's a couple of ways of doing moderated usability testing. A typical test generally goes to 2 to 4 scenarios. They might be multi-part scenarios, and they're scheduled for 30 to 45 minutes. We usually book an hour knowing that we're going to try to stop by 45 minutes. Guerrilla hallway or intercept testing, it's named that way because you really are intercepting someone in a hallway to say, hey, do you have 10 minutes to help us? But you usually stick to one scenario. So it's a much shorter round of testing, but you can get more testing, more people tested in a short amount of time. You can do the testing in person. So if you do it in person, try to use the user's space. We found that, we've actually had people use a loaner laptop during testing, and the way they interact with the loaner laptop is very different from how they actually interact with their laptop or their laptop and their monitor at their desk. So you really want to try to get in the person space if you can. Another way of doing that is also through remote testing. So for us, our first round through was pre-COVID. So almost every test that we'd done like 80 tests over, 8 or 9 sprints. And almost every single test except for one was in person. And people really loved it. They were really hesitant to do remote tests. But once COVID hit, everything had to be remote. And we found that most users are now comfortable with remote testing. As long as you can do a screen share and audio, you're gold. One of the things that remote testing may allow you to do is record. We don't record any of our sessions. First off, it would require paperwork. We'd have to go to our internal review board for scientific research or whatever it's called. Clearly, I don't even know what it's called, but they would have to sign off on us doing this research, even if it was just for staff. And there might be, your company may have other rules about, what can you record from staff? What can you use those recordings for? On a realistic sense for us, just regardless of the paperwork aspect of it, our turnaround times are so tight that we wouldn't even have time in most cases to watch the recording between when we finished our last test and when we started talking about what the problems were that we uncovered. So, practically speaking, we have no real use for recording any of our sessions, but remote testing does offer you that option if, all of the logistics of it work out. So I'm going to go through the sample script. This is the intro of our sample script. It is really, really long. But it sets the stage. It's important to set the stage for this is how this testing is done. A lot of folks, they haven't done usability testing before. And so it's helpful for them to understand this is what we're doing. And again, we're not testing you. Those 3 things I talked about earlier, we want you to think aloud. We're not testing you. You can do no wrong. And we want you to be honest with us. We use the intro to sort of outline those pieces of what's about to happen. We also let them know that the tool is under development, that some features and functionality don't work. Even if you're like 99% to production, still tell them that. It gives you some wiggle room there in case some of the data is off, or if some button doesn't work right because you didn't test every single filter action or whatnot. On a side note, I think I mentioned this earlier, we do use real data. Even if it's a bit stale, we try to make the data as relevant to the users we're testing as we can, just to get them to engage a little bit more like they would in the real world. So I mentioned before that this intro is really long, but this section I have highlighted, it's like 3 sentences. That's the only part of this intro that actually changes from test to test. The rest of it, once you have your first round intro, or your first, ever intro written, the rest of it, you don't have to touch. It's just this one paragraph where you talk about this is what we're testing in this particular test. This is what this dashboard is about, and that sort of thing. So in the test itself, the facilitator, there's a whole lot of reading during that intro. And then it's time for the facilitator to sort of shut their mouth a little bit and get the user talking, because the whole reason we're there is to learn from the users. So to get them talking, we start asking them some intro questions. And some of them are generic, like describe your role. When was the last time you did X? In this case, we're talking about fundraiser metrics. So we asked, like, what data did you pull for your last one-on-one? Like, where did you get that data from? So it gets them sort of into the mindset of this is the type of data that we're talking about in this dashboard. And then we move on to the dashboard itself. So with a data dashboard, and one of the things that we now know to do every single time is to ask the user to talk aloud as they describe their first impressions of the page. So what can you do on the page without clicking around too much? What strikes you? What can you do here? What's it for? That not only helps them sort of take a breath and get situated, but it helps them go through and actually read and interpret the dashboard. It's not just that like gut reaction of, oh my God, there's a whole bunch of data on the screen. It's oh, here's the data on the screen. First, there's a title that says blah. Then there's this chart that's telling me blah. But as you hear them narrate what they're seeing on the screen, you're actually doing a little bit of data literacy checking in a way too, because you can tell whether they understand the chart or not. And that can help you either add a couple more like basic, really easy questions just to get them to that point where they actually understand what they're seeing. There have been some times when we skipped it and it ended up biting us because we were 2 or 3 questions in and it was very clear to us that the user didn't know what the heck they were looking at. But had we done that first impressions question, we would have been able to actually get them to take that pause and actually understand, yep, this is what I'm looking at. This is the data that I'm seeing, and this is what I'm learning about whatever's on the screen. So once you've done that, get them talking and the first impressions, we then go into the main content of the dashboard. So this is a dashboard that we tested. There are 6 tiles arranged in 2 groups. There's some filters on the side, and the tiles themselves each have a descriptor, a title, and a number. And the idea is that if you click on a tile at the bottom of the page, which is cut off here for space, you would then be able to see the detail. You'd be able to see the 4 past due proposals and plans. And all of that. So on this page, each of those little tiles represented a somewhat new concept, or at least a new phrasing of a concept. We didn't have a shared vocabulary across our fundraising department about any of this stuff, except for past due. We had past due proposals and plans. That was it. Everything else was sort of we're making up some terms here. So we wanted to make sure that people actually knew what each of those tiles meant. And we also, this is one of the first times a lot of these folks are going to be interacting with Tableau. So we wanted to make sure that they knew that they could click on a tile to show detail. And so those were the 2 big things that we wanted to test. So we did guerrilla testing in this round. There were 6 or 7, I think it was 7 different scenarios. Each were named for a cookie. They're named for cookies because we used cookies to lure them to testing. So one of the perks of doing in-person testing is you can actually use food. But basically, we presented each of them with one of these scenarios, and then we watched what happened. And this is the oatmeal raisin scenario. So it consists of 2 main questions. The first couple questions were first impressions related. The next 2, what you see here and highlighted, are the meat of what we wanted people to do. So where would you go to find X? And then for whatever question or whatever tile they landed on, we wanted them to explain to us, well, what does X mean to you? So if they clicked on or landed on the wrong one, we still wanted to understand why it was that they went to that one instead of the one that we intended for them to go to. And then question 4 here, we wanted them to perform a task that would have required them to click on a tile. So do they get that clicking on a tile will give them the detail? So pick one of the prospects. Well, how do you find the prospect? You have to click the tile to see the detail. And what you'll notice here is that nowhere in this do we tell them, how to do it. It's not training. We don't mention specific elements of the screen. Like we never say filter this or click X or highlight Y. We just give them a goal. So find prospects you need to reach out to. Pick one of the prospects and tell us more about them. So we give them this goal, and then we again watch what happens. So after we've gone through all of our scenarios, we then have to close it up, and we close up a usability testing session like you might close up an interview. Do you have any questions for me? Thanks for helping us test the tool. And it's pretty simple. There's intros, there's or there's the intro, there's scenarios, and then there's the closing. Nice little sandwich. But there's some complicated stuff there. There can be some challenges. Throughout the test, the user will ask you questions, and you have to be really, really, really comfortable not answering them. And it's the hardest thing in the world. So what we often do is we have to, do boomerang questions, like the boomerang that you see here. So if they ask, what does this button do? We throw it back to them. Well, what do you think that button does? What do you expect that button to do? And that means there's a whole lot of non-answers throughout the testing process itself. But during the closing, so you can go ahead and actually start answering those questions, close the loop on them. And, there's an asterisk on the slide because usability testing, it's not an interview, it's not a conversation, it's not user training, but there are bits and pieces of interview, conversation, and training scattered throughout the test. The interview really is that beginning, getting them to talk piece where we ask to understand what their role is. There can also be some follow-ups based on how they interacted with the tool, where they might have gotten stuck, where you can start asking questions. You may want to save those questions till the end. And same, again, same with conversation and training, especially those two pieces we generally save to the closing part of the testing. We might, if they got stuck on something, we may show them, yeah, this is how you would do that, and then get some more feedback about, oh, was that easy to do? Like what might you have done differently? What might make it a smoother process for you? And one of the things that as you do more and more testing, you'll have to get more comfortable with it, but you will get the experience of being more comfortable with sort of pushing some of those questions to the closing. And there are a ton of resources out there about how to do usability testing, how to be a good moderator. There's videos from the Nielsen Norman group on using silence, which I'm really bad at, using echo questions and boomerang questions and that sort of thing. And if you have a user experience or a user research group in your company, another way to just learn and get experience is by asking to participate either as a testing participant, so as a user, or as a member of the observation team, just to see this is how it goes, this is what the process is like, these are the types of things that come up. UX folks are very much like the DataViz community, very much like the Tableau user group community. We're willing to share methods and bring people into the fold because, we want to make Tableau, make UX a little bit better for all of us. So we've done our testing and we've, observed our 5 users. We need to figure out what is it that we learned. So one of the things we learned is what's confusing. What did we think was maybe straightforward, but wasn't so straightforward? Again, we've had those points where people say things like, I don't know what this chart means. There's just too much on the screen. I don't know where to look first. What's the difference between these two menus? We learned things about what's hard or what, was something that we thought was easy, not really all that easy. Can I filter with this? I don't see a way to do this. Hey, there's a filter right there. It says the same words. We also get cases, where we learn what people like or don't like. What do they like that we can try to do more of? And we see and hear things about what's on the screen. Again, they totally miss the filters, but we also learn about behavior, about attitude, about feeling. So sort of some of that fuzzy stuff. So we actually had an example where someone said, this page makes me antsy. And in the process of the testing, we did a little bit of digging. Like we asked questions like, well, what about it makes you antsy? And it turned out that we were using our Tableau defaults, that bright blue, that bright orange. And what was making this person antsy was that there was a lot of bright orange on the screen. Toning down the bright orange, like changing the transparency down to 50%, helped the point get across that, hey, this is something to look at, but it also did it in a way that didn't make them feel so antsy. We also have examples where, our managers really don't like comparing individuals. They say that every fundraiser is a different, is different. Everyone has a different portfolio. What they're going to be able to raise is going to be different based on who's in their portfolio. And so we presented this manager version of this tool to folks where they could actually compare side by side different fundraisers, and they stopped dead in their tracks and said, no, we don't compare fundraisers. We don't compare them. So what we ended up having to learn was how to talk about comparisons without using the C word, compare. It's a trigger word. So instead, we set a context. We say, if this fundraiser is seeing an uptick in this area, you want to know if that's similar to what's happening with other fundraisers. How would you do that? Notice nowhere in that did I actually say the word compare, but basically when you're saying you want to see what's happening with other people who are similar, you're doing a comparison. So using the C word is bad, but when we try to call, when we don't call it out as such, we rephrase our questions, we're able to get a little bit more from the user, and we have a better chance of getting heard. The other thing beyond just finding the issues is it helps us prioritize. We can learn, we see what's happening, how frequently it's happening, what's a showstopper. It's not just us saying we think that this is going to trip up users. We actually see this tripped up 7 of our 10 users, or all of our fundraisers got tripped up, but only a couple of the managers did. And of that, this many were actually able to recover, so maybe it's not as huge of an issue as we thought. So all of that sort of goes into trying to figure out what's the next move with some of these issues. I know I talked about empathy before. When we did the PFAD experiment in the libraries, it was all about building empathy with our users. And yet general usability testing is all about building empathy. You get developers especially to be in the room or a virtual room with the users, and they get to hear what the users are saying, see what they're getting tripped up with, and they actually also get to see that those aha moments. And we've definitely seen a lot of those aha moments as we're testing things, and it's really helpful for a developer to see, because it makes us understand, like, here's some actual outcomes of what we've done. It's not just we built a product and we shipped it out and now we don't care about it. Here's how people are actually using or reacting to it. And it's also a great way to build relationships with your users. You have their undivided attention for a chunk of time, and they have your attention too. But they can see that you actually care about what they need to accomplish. It's not just you want to throw this product out at them, but you actually care about their outcomes. Can they use the product? Is the product actually going to help them do something? In our case, it not only helped us find evangelizers for FPT, but also for Tableau in general. We know which teams are going to be more willing to work with us for new Tableau products, and those are sort of the ones that we go to over and over again to try to build up what we can for the larger general fundraiser population. All right, back to actual usability testing. So once we've done all of our testing, we've identified these issues, really actually have to go in and talk through them, figure out what they are, and debrief. So as soon as possible after the last test, we try to schedule a meeting with everyone who was in the meeting or in the testing. So all of our observers, all of our facilitators. There have been times when we've involved higher level stakeholders in the conversation. Sometimes that goes well, sometimes it doesn't. It's all, your mileage may vary. It may work in your environment, it may not work in others. The debrief process has 3 steps. First, you want to review all of the issues. Even if they're duplicates, you just want to review them just to say, yep, we saw this, yep, we saw this. And then you want to prioritize them. So what's a deal breaker? Where were things just stopping users from moving forward? What were they not able to recover from? What kept happening over and over again? What other things are going to be high impact, either as issues or as opportunities? If we fix this, is that going to open up something else for us to be able to do? So with the project team, we definitely go through 1 and 2. And I call that meeting the problems meeting. The solutions meeting, sometimes we'll do it as part of that same problems meeting. Sometimes we'll do it separately, and sometimes we'll include more people or fewer people in the solutions meeting, depending on, again, what works in your environment. But in the solutions meeting, we're really trying to figure out, okay, what can we actually do about these issues? Which issues are we actually able to solve or do something about? Which ones do we want to just punt to training? Which ones are really the ones where we're going to get the most bang for our buck? And in that solutions meeting, we'll figure out, we'll prioritize within there too, and try to figure out what the right next steps are. So this is what our issues look like at the end of one of our problems meetings, I think. And then this is what it looked like as we went into as we left the solutions meeting. So each of these pieces that has like this little like line thing underneath it, there's a solution there that we were going to try to implement. And our plan was to work through all the high priority issues, and then if we still had time at the end of our build time, we would dig into the low priority and so on. So I think I have a few more minutes. I'm going to go through some before and afters. So this was our landing page essentially for the fundraiser portfolio tool back when it was called the fundraiser portfolio analysis tool. We took analysis out because that's another trigger word. So one of the things that we learned while doing this is that we're not designers. So this layout, this title, and these little bars that were sort of default use Tableau to make buttons, they just didn't work. People didn't know where they were. So we and the CMIs all for the titles of each of the pages just wasn't people were sort of skimming over that and ignoring it. And the title just didn't pop very much. People didn't really know where they were on the and so we went to our communications team and they gave us some advice, put the title in a header, make the left nav look a little bit more like a website where you highlight and bold and underline the thing that you're actually, the page that you're on. Next to that invisible title, we had these 3 filters, and these 3 filters applied to just about every single page. The first filter applied to every single page that was part of this workbook. The other 2 applied to probably 9 out of 11 tabs, maybe even 9 out of 12 at that time. But we wanted to try to make it a consistent header, right? Like, these are the things that you set it and forget it. But it turned out that on this first tab, where only the first filter applied, people got really, really confused. And that confusion was enough for us to say, yeah, that plan of trying to set it and forget it in the header, it's not going to work. So we ended up taking out 2 of those filters because, again, they just did not apply here. And it wasn't just the decoration, I guess you might call it. It was also the data. We had cases where we had to change the data. So in this instance, we had these 2 tiles in the middle about how much or how many people did you ask for money and how much did you ask for. And what we learned, we are basing this all on, there are goals in the system, like actual goals logged for a certain amount range. And we thought, okay, that's the amount range. That's what we have goals for. That's what we're going to show. Well, it turns out that some groups actually had a second level. They were focusing on the lower level asks. So they were, our default goals are, our default goals are at this 100K to 4.9 million level, but some people had goals at a lower level, and some people, while they might have had goals at that 100K to 4.9, they actually cared a little bit about the 5 million plus level too. And so we couldn't just put all of the data into one bar and cross our fingers and say, yep, that's good. We actually had to show that breakout of, here's where you're supposed to be spending your time. Here's where you might actually be bringing in money above or below where you are. And by doing so, we were actually able to open up the usefulness of this beyond just our primary group. It ended up being something that multiple offices were able to make use of. The last thing that we learned during our first few rounds of usability testing is that a lot of instructional information people are going to ignore. You just have to kind of drill it into them. So these little info icons, we went through different colors, different sizes, different fonts for the eye in the information icon, to try to see what people would actually see and be able to use, because we knew that each of these terms, we wanted to be able to define it sort of close to where it was being used. So if you hovered over this info icon near visits, you would actually see this is what a visit means. But what we learned was people were going to ignore them. And so there are some things that you're going to get that you're going to have to put training towards. And so identifying these info icons and saying, hey, don't forget, when you see this blue eye, that's what you should go to. That was one of the things that we ended up learning by doing our, 3 or 4 rounds into usability testing and trying all those variations. It was like, no, it doesn't matter what we do. We're going to have to actually train to this and maybe provide some more information. So we actually put on the homepage, we did this. This is what this info icon means. Don't forget to go there, in addition to whatever in-person training we did around that. I'm going to skip this one in the interest of time. Actually, I'm going to go back just a little bit. So in all of these examples thus far, I've shown you bar charts and of some variety or another, whether it's a bullet chart or this where, you have 2 diverging bar charts. Scatter plots are hard for our users. Line charts, they're not a fan of. They want their bar charts, they want their tables. But for this chart in particular, we knew that we had to use a scatter plot because we were asking people to compare at an individual level, an individual row level, 2 values for a certain thing, in this case, proposals. And we wanted to also give them the opportunity to compare different potential values. So, on the left axis here, we have 3 different values you can choose from on that axis, and 4 on the x-axis at the bottom. And what we learned initially, our first tester was like, I don't know what I'm looking at. Turned out one of the things that we had forgotten to do was to actually put a title on this page. So probably about 10 people had seen this thing before we put it in front of a user, and we all missed the fact that we had no title on this chart. But having that title, telling them this is what you're looking at 26 closed proposals, and these are the two things that you're charting or that are on the chart, ask amount versus granted amount. That was key to helping set context. And it's one of those things that we're like, well, duh, we should have done that, but we totally missed it in the process of building. The other thing that we tried to do here was we tried to give them like total control over what they could select on each axis. But it turns out that was a little bit too much control. Not all of these combinations made sense, and even if they did make sense, they weren't really things that people were thinking about. And so we ended up curating a smaller set of options. We put them with all the other filters, which is where people kept looking for these things. And we added an info icon that actually went through every option and said, this is what you're comparing when you compare these two, and this is why it's important. And that helped people actually understand this is what they're looking at, and this is why they should look at that. So those are some of the big things we found on that one. I don't know where I am on time. Should I pause for questions, or do I have a little bit more? I'm going to say
mute, sorry. I think you're good. Yes, keep going.
Okay, awesome. So one of the things that we did for FPT was we intentionally, our first build, our version 1 was all about the individual fundraiser. And hopefully, hold on, there we go. In version 1, user can pick a single fundraiser and look at that single fundraiser's stuff. In version 2, we needed to add a team option because the manager said we don't want this unless fundraisers can see themselves. So we said, okay, we'll put the fundraisers first. When we started building an option for the managers, that was version 2. So we had to add a team version that let managers see their own teams and let us put an entire office together, because an office consists of multiple managers. And at both of those, both the manager and office level, people wanted to see not only their aggregate for their team, but also the individual people within the team. And so that was all what version 2 was about. And we also learned during training. So I had mentioned earlier, during testing, we used our loaner laptops and we had it all set up for the users. But what we learned during training was that, well, they don't actually behave the way we had them set up to behave on the loaner laptops. For instance, though we had sized our dashboards to fit an entire screen, most of our users don't actually expand their browser window to fit the entire screen, which meant that some content, usually the filters, sometimes more, was being cut off. So, they would either completely miss the fact that there was filters, or they would miss some of the data. So in version 2, we wanted to figure out how to deal with that. We could either, shrink our dashboards down to size, which was not going to happen because there's some content that was just already a tight fit, and making it even smaller just wasn't going to work. We could also get rid of the left nav, or we could move the filters. And at that point, we had just upgraded to, I think, 2019 point something. And one of the cool features of that was the ability to use the show hide layout containers. And so we decided, okay, we're going to hide the filters. You have to click on that little filter icon in order to see them. And we also moved a bunch of stuff to the footer. We introduced this footer that had logo and branding, something that our higher ups were kind of clamoring for. And so version 2, we built it out in 4 groups of tabs. There were like 2 to 3 tabs, 2 to 3 tabs in each group. And we did 4-ish rounds of usability testing. And our focus was initially the header. We knew that we were going to have to hide those filters behind a button. But we would hope that we'd also learn a little bit about the data, but it really ended up becoming almost all about the header. There are 3 things that the header needed to be able to do. We needed to be able to see the teams in aggregate or by fundraiser. We needed to be able to filter a subset of the team, and we also needed to be able to show and hide those filters. So our initial round was this very basic single dropdown to pick a fundraiser or team, and the filters were hidden behind the filter icon. So there's no label on the icon. It was just, everything was very minimalist. We were trying to make as few changes as possible from version 1. But for the team stuff, we very quickly learned that we had oversimplified. And that's one of those things that, like, oversimplifying and you going a minimalist route can actually bite you, but you don't really realize it until you start testing it and see how users actually interact with things. So we went from this version that played way too fast because I was talking too much, but we went from this version where we tried to, let's try this one more time, where we tried to separate teams from and filtering subsets in 2 different filters, putting some of it in the header versus all of it in the header, using different button options. Like we had this pretty toggle, the show high toggle in group 2A that we thought was super awesome. It was gonna work. It was really cool looking. It's just like what you see on your phone. No one knew what the heck it did. And so we eventually ended on this three-step process. You pick your team, you pick how you're going to see your team, and if you're looking at a team, you decide who to include or exclude. On the this double this our final button for the team versus fundraiser view. We did a lot of research in on the UX side about how do people actually do toggles, and the ability to add redundancy, so having both the check mark and the blue coloring was kind of key for us here. It helped us encode, this is what you really want, this is what you have selected, in a way that the cute little toggles with just the X or the check mark just didn't do well. On the filter side, we tried a whole bunch of different variations of how to show the filter. Do we use words? Do we use an icon? Do we use both? If we use both, what is the icon? And we ended up with this option that was very similar to the sort and filter option in Excel, and we were like, yes, we finally have it. And so we tested that version, and it turned out that people got really, really, really annoyed. They would work through, animation's gone wrong. They would work through this, and they would realize that in order to see anything on the chart after they've shown the filters, they have to hide them, and then they have to show them and hide them over and over again as they apply more filters. And this is one of those aha moments where we're like, well, crap, we went the wrong way. We decided to hide the filters, but maybe that wasn't the right thing. These navigation options are always here, but people only look at them once. They look at them once to leave the screen. So why are they always showing? So we actually ended up redesigning our entire, this is round 3B or something like that. Like, we're many rounds into testing where we finally got to a point where we're like, oh yeah, that was totally the wrong move from the beginning. And we ended up going with this top navigation instead. So we decided to always show filters. We moved help to the footer, and then we moved our left nav to top nav. In the interest of time, I'm not going to go through all of the magic that happened behind the scenes for this top nav, but it changed a lot between our original view, which was sort of more like the Best Buy option, where you had multiple tabs or multiple buttons along the top, and then there are options within each button. And we got to this single button version where we actually showed all of the options. We did what's called a card sort in the user interface and information architecture world, to help to identify, how should the different tabs be grouped? What should we name them? And it turned out the way that we'd actually originally had them grouped by topic wasn't the right way. Our fundraisers wanted to group them by importance and frequency of use. And so we ended up rearranging our entire navigation menu around what our users actually wanted, which was I thought was great. But we also gave them the option to not only see the name of the tab, but get a little bit more description, because sometimes these tab names just weren't all that intuitive either. I call this design Mellow Yellow, and we've actually incorporated this general design, not only like the background that you see with the footer and the header, but this idea of having a single button at the top to sort of do a lot of about stuff for our dashboard. And we've integrated that into a template that we are now officially rolling out. I think I closed out the Jira ticket last week to build the template, so I think we're official now. So I'm going to scroll through a bunch of other examples. So what have we learned? Hopefully we've learned that we are not our users usually. And testing with our users is imperative to making sure that what we build is user-centered, and it's actually useful for our users. But one of the other things, I think Lucas mentioned this earlier, where there's data visualization best practices are something that we always talk about, but one of the other things that we need to think about is, beyond data visualization best practices, we're not just designing data products, we're designing web and mobile tools. So we've got to think about those data viz best practices, but we also have to think about web and user experience best practices. We can't just build something pretty with data. We've got to be aware of how our users interact on the web, what they expect based on those experiences on the web at large, and what and we have to build our data products around that. But the good news is we don't have to start from scratch. There's a wealth of practices out there in the data viz or outside of the data viz world, from information architecture, user interface design, user-centered design, UX, any one of those those many fields that we can apply in our data products. And usability testing is just one of those products. It helps us get insight into our users and how they approach our dashboards, so that we can build better products that are more useful to them, more usable, and that can lead to more successful outcomes because our users are actually not only using them, but able to use them to do something good. We just need to be willing to experiment with what, with what we have and what, and learn what's out there, and apply what's out there. So again, I have this bunch of resources. I'm going to copy and paste them in the chat in just a second. But I think we have a couple minutes for questions, maybe.
Yeah, I think we've got a great question from Keith Gates. And he says, when the current working model is go, 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 and does not adhere to a traditional development model, how do you convince the business to slow down and take this sort of thorough testing approach, which I think is just such a fabulous question, because if we all want to get our stuff out there, we want to close that ticket, we want to send it on its way. And so what are your thoughts about, if you're kind of swimming upstream a little bit in trying to get folks to slow down and implement this kind of fantastic testing?
So guerrilla testing or hallway or intercept testing, that case where we do one scenario, can be a huge help in sort of making the business case to try it again. It's 10 to 15 minutes with each user. Within half a day, you can have tested your 5 users plus done some analysis of what you found. And you've only spent half a day. If you can get everyone in the, time just right to be able to do it all, even if you schedule it out in advance, like I think that's just doing it once and being able to share, this is what we learned, these are some major changes we made to what we were doing. If again, we don't record any of our sessions, but if you are recording your sessions, you can also just use those clips and say, this is what we saw. Like, we were ready to go live with this thing, and 3 out of our 5 testers just got stuck at step 1 or got stuck at step 2. Like, do we really want to push this thing out where people are going to get stuck without actually getting to the whole, getting to the meat of what we were trying to give them? So that's kind of a try guerrilla testing. It's again half a day if you stick to the one scenario and do just a small number of users, and you'll be surprised at what you can learn and how much just having that first example of this is how how we didn't waste our time can be a huge help in helping make the case. I mean, that said, we've run into trouble where, like, we spent a lot of time on usability testing in this thing, but we also were able to show this is the impact of it. But we've been told at times, don't expect to do usability testing in every dashboard. Don't expect to do it. Well, over time, we've shown how useful it can be, that it's now part of our process. It's now actually written in our development process. We are going to do usability testing, or some form of other user testing where we're not just saying, here's the tool, go play with it for a week and tell us if you find any problems, but we're actually going to watch people interact with the tool. So that's kind of it took a while, but we got there eventually.
Roshni, a quick question for you. So as time goes by and then maybe your user base changes and now you're introducing maybe new behaviors, I guess, do you guys go at a certain cadence and kind of redo the testing as well? Or, how does that work for you guys?
So when we open up something that we've already built, we will test it. I mean, there are some assumptions that we'll make, that, like, I'm trying to think of an example and I really can't. We'll assume that they can do X, Y, and Z if we're not changing the layout drastically or changing the definitions drastically. But I mentioned earlier, we try to do a mix of easy, medium, and hard tests. And so part of that process is, we're going to get the new people who are in these roles that we know are users of this tool, get them in and say, and see, does it still work? You can do usability testing at any level, whether you're still prototyping or whether you have a final product, or if you're opening up a final product for an update or an enhancement or a bug fix even. So it's something that you can apply at all times. And I mean, you can test the same thing 100 times and you'll find out new things about it, right? Like, you'll find new usability issues. So I don't know if that answers your question.
It does. Thank you. We did receive another question here. We'll maybe wrap up with this one and then pass it along to Chris for the sake of time. It says, I'm guessing what you learn in a major development like this easily applies to future dashboards. Would you agree, or is this really not the case?
Yes, it
Thanks for
does.
the question.
So that I talked about this. Let me rewind a little bit. Here we go. So we talked about this showing filters thing. Our original template that we built last summer before we did testing for version 2, last summer meaning 2020 summer, our plan was to hide all of our filters. They're all going to be behind this button. And after 3 or 4 rounds of testing with the hidden filters and realizing, wow, that was such a bad move, we changed our template. Like, our template took us over a year to build, in part because we kept learning during our usability testing. And there are likely elements of that template that are going to change again in the future as we do more testing, as we try to implement new features in Tableau, or just try to continue building out and sharing what we have with our users. So yeah, like what you learn there are some things that are going to be applicable to other dashboards, but there's also some things that are just going to be very specific to the one that you're working on. Things that are more around terminology or what chart works best in this particular case, those might not have wider applicability, but things that are sort of like this showing and hiding filters, how we do our info icons, how our header and footer in general work, like all of that was highly influenced by what we learned during testing over the last year. So that's it.
Awesome. Well, Roshni, there's some follow-up comments there on the chat window. I encourage you to take a look whenever you get a chance.
Will do.
But
Thanks.
thank you very much for taking the time here to share the process.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
With our group. Yep, this was awesome. Thank you. Chris, I'll pass it along to you.
Okay, great. Thanks, Lucas. Thanks everyone at Casey Tug for giving Vince and I this platform to share our story. Like I said, I've only been here for just over a month, so I'm new to the business of sports, but it's been an awesome ride so far, and I'm really excited to continue over the course of this year and into the future. So with that, I'll share my screen, and you guys can kind of let me know if you see.
Yep, we're good, Chris.
Everything's good to go. All right, so this segment of today, this afternoon, kind of coining Tablowing ticket sales at Carolina Hurricanes, a retrospective and prospective look at an up-and-coming analytics department in the business of sports. I'm Chris Paolini, and here with me is my colleague, Vince Lorenz, who's our business intelligence analyst and has held the fort over the last year or two in the pandemic, and I'm really excited to continue to work with him. So real quick, just about me, 30 years and 30 seconds. I'll try to be really quick and brief about it. But I grew up in New York. So those are my kind of 4 sports teams. Growing up as a big sports fan. I'm withering away a little bit on the Giants. I mean, unfortunately, but that's just kind of how it is. I'm just kidding. I'm always be a diehard Giants fan. It's just very, very tough to watch them up late. Vince is also a Giants fan, so he knows the feeling. So grew up in upstate New York. Went to Union College, played football there, and then went to Clarkson University for graduate school. I worked for Regeneron and VA Healthcare, upstate New York when I was up there, and then also had the opportunity to visit a few cool places out in New Zealand and Switzerland over my course of education. Then moved down to South Carolina with a few best friends of mine from high school without a job. To Charleston, which is a beautiful city. If you've never been there, definitely go. It's an incredible place to be and live and work. Started my career there in healthcare analytics at a few places, Molina Healthcare and Charles ENT Analogy, which is one of the larger ENT practices in the southern country. Got my first dog, there's Julio, and my now wife Kelly down there to the bottom right. Moved to North Carolina. Into Durham, North Carolina, which we love it here. It's been booming over the last few years, and it's going to be booming for the foreseeable future. Worked at UNC Health for 3 years, where I'll attribute a lot of my skill sets and analytics to later on in my career. likely when I look back at UNC Health, I learned a ton there around enterprise analytics. They're amongst the best in the industry in healthcare for what they do. And now I work for the Hurricanes, obviously, for the last 30 days. And there's a few other pictures there of me, kind of signing standing next to the contract signed for the home we bought here. Got another dog, Ezzy, as my wife in our engagement photo. And then we took a honeymoon to Alaska recently. So that's kind of my life in 30, a little bit longer than 30 seconds, but that's kind of been my career so far. And, now I'm with the Hurricanes. So the agenda for this presentation, we'll start off with kind of a storytelling of kind of our department and also driving into the focus point, which is around ticket sales reporting using Tableau. But we'll start off with Vince will kind of share the pandemic impact on our departments and organization, and kind of talk about some of the department ramp up and our kind of our hopeful moving forward with a lot of things that are going on. We'll go into some getting started around, kind of day one, kind of when I joined the Hurricanes on August 23rd. We did a lot of things there. And then we'll move into BI brainstorming with Tableau, kind of where Tableau comes to the mix, and all the things we did around kind of just brainstorming following our getting started period. And then look into kind of our adoption campaign kickoff for, which department in the system. Obviously, I kind of give you a highlight of what we're obviously doing. It's ticket sales, but yeah, a little adoption campaign for growing our kind of BI reporting and BI, our analytics department. And then I'll show some ticket sales demos or some dashboards that we've built over the last month that have kind of kicked off our program. And then at the end, we'll finish it off with some future plans that we're hoping to grow here, obviously with Tableau as a centerpiece to that plan. So Vince, I'll turn it over to you to kind of talk about some of our pandemic impact and department ramp up.
Yeah, thank you, Chris. So this right here is kind of what I'll be covering. It's really kind of just everything prior to when Chris got onto the team, which included about 1.5 years of me both teaming up with someone that we had prior, and then that person left, and then we're kind of where we are today. So kind of to unpack that a bit, and a bit of background on myself. I'm born and raised in North Carolina. Been here practically my whole life. Grew up in Greensboro. Went to school at NC State in Raleigh. Came back to Greensboro to get my master's, and now I'm back in Raleigh with the Canes, and was very fortunate to come back to a city that I love. So it's been great, in the midst of all the bad things that happened in 2020. That was one good thing, I suppose. So yeah, we can start off with the slide here. Yep. So as you see here, yep, I was hired in March 2020, which was I think a pretty precarious time for almost everybody on the planet. So with that, I was only in the office for 12 days before we were sent to go work from home, and everything kind of went haywire. So that was a pretty big challenge at the beginning of my career, especially something I was very excited about. I mean, who isn't pumped to start working for a sports team, and then in the midst of that, sports essentially are put on hold for no one really knew how long. And just a lot of things were up in the air. And so while it was still super exciting and I was thankful to have a job, there were definitely drawbacks to a global pandemic beginning. So, with all of that, we had pretty full scale cutbacks, as I think most sports teams experienced. Furloughs, we lost a lot of great people either through layoffs or, just going to find other opportunities that weren't in a industry that was hit so hard by the pandemic. So, our organization took a hit for sure. Not being able to host games in 2020, when we had the bubble up in Toronto, and we were thankful, have hockey being played later on in the season. But at the same time, having that hockey in the building and having our home team play at home was something that we really missed, both, in a sentimental sense and in a revenue sense. So, kind of there, we made the best of the circumstances. When I started, we had a team member who was in Chris's current role. He started with the team 2 weeks after I did. So he only had 2 days in the office. So it was a bit worse. And later in 2020, I believe around October, he actually took another job. So it was really interesting because we were sort of still in a hiring freeze. We couldn't replace that position at that time. And of course, I don't think the vision was really ever for me to absorb all of the responsibility that came with his departure. So there was a lot going on, both with our analytics group, which was at that time just me, and then also with my career. So that's really what the making the best of our circumstances was. And then that led into the departmental shake-up, and where we kind of were going into most of 2021, where we were just trying to keep our heads above water. There was a lot to take on, both with me learning the ins and outs of how we want to build out our department, but then also just keeping up with the needs that people were used to having fulfilled, and then trying to show my worth as an employee. I mean, it was just, you can imagine all the things that you'd have to juggle being the only person in a department, while also trying to learn how to do your job well. So it was there was a lot of good, and then there was a lot of challenges in 2020, of course. I think that we can all relate to that. So 2021 hits, January 2021. We actually have hockey games in Raleigh. Now, family and friends are only allowed to go. We aren't really allowed to enjoy the product as much as we'd like to, but it is reason for optimism. Later in that year, in April, coworkers start to come back into the building. So I get to meet people, which, I didn't really know most of the people that I worked with to that point. I only knew them in a virtual sense. So, things were looking up, and that kind of led, into the slightest sense of normalcy, where, at least things, there was a light at the end of the tunnel, it felt like. So, as 2021 carried on, we were able to host games. We were allowed to get fans back into the building. We were able to host some incredible postseason series. Unfortunately, our run was cut short to the eventual Cup champions, so I won't feel too bad about it. But, it was exciting nonetheless. And from there, we had a lot of revenue coming in, and things were starting to look better. And we kind of got the green light to start getting back to normal. And a big part of that for our department was adding someone who can kind of, fill in what we lost, and then also add a ton to our department. And luckily, Chris was able to join our team a month ago. And I think that he both adds what we lost and then adds a ton of value on top of that. And it's been fantastic working with him so far. So that's kind of where we are right now. In a moment, we'll get more into the specifics of what 2021 looks like and what we've been able to do so far. But that's kind of the background on what the department looked like in 2020 and during the pandemic, and what we're looking at going forward. So thank you, Chris, and I'll turn it back over to you.
Appreciate it, man. Yeah. So basically what, just moving forward from there, this is kind of our small team here with Vince and I. We have Glenn as our Vice President of IT and Business Analytics, Maya, who's our Senior Director of IT Services, and then, our Junior Systems Administrator, Sam. And then we have two, we just actually brought someone in today for the first day as Systems Administrator, and then hopefully down the road, Data Architect or our Data Developer is down the road, hopefully. But that's kind of our current department structure, and after our go-ahead to hire this year. So from there, we can kind of talk about our day one. So coming in first day in sports business for me. My whole career has been in healthcare analytics. I have no experience in sports business. I read some books beforehand. I try to get involved. Like I said, I've always been big into sports. I love sports. Just never really had any experience in sports business. but I knew kind of the foundations of what we might need to do being at such a good organization in UNC Health prior. And so I just kind of laid it all out there, and we hit the ground running on day one. So the first thing that we kind of talked about is, getting a understanding of our data infrastructure and our kind of an environment review. And we definitely need to do some cleanup of what is production worthy and what's in testing development, and kind of getting an understanding of what we can actually get down to a bare bone structure so we could scale up over the next 6 months into next year. So here's our kind of current hurricanes data flow, which probably looks like a lot of your organizations and data flows, right? You have a lot of data sources that are kind of flowing into a warehouse, some integrated, some unintegrated. So this is kind of our overarching structure. A lot of some social media metrics, email marketing, retail pro shop data from Shopify through our Carolina Pro Shop, ticket purchase data through Arctics, and so forth. So it kind of all flows into a warehouse administered by one of our great vendors, Core Software. They host our warehouse and give us, as much access as we need to write custom views and SQL codes that kind of are the basis for our Tableau data sources that we've now are now kind of sourcing our Tableau dashboards. And we use dbeaver as our DBMS, and we host our visualization or Tableau server, which Vince and I are our company admins, our server admins. So that's kind of a lot of the back end stuff that we kind of got an understanding of, and we just wanted to make sure we got an overview of our data sources and what we needed to understand. And then on the front, on the other side, on the Tableau server config, we kind of wanted to structure and organize Tableau server in the best way possible. Now, me learning what Tableau server really is, a lot of it's really just permissions. Everything's set at the project level, so it's really just an organization of permissions. So once you understand that, then you can kind of situate everything appropriately to what is good for your organization, right? You have to know what your permissions are, what level of transparency each department wants or needs, and obviously the more transparency, the easier it is to kind of get permissions and access around. You don't have to restrict so much. From there, we went to kind of a BI brainstorming. So this includes Tableau. How can we increase adoption using Tableau? Who are our sponsors in the organization? Who believes in business intelligence or data visualization? What works currently? And so, identify low-hanging fruit. So we essentially had to ask some questions, questions that we asked ourselves on day one. Right? What is the current state of organizational BI reporting here at the Hurricanes? What are the number of views or rate of adoption that we have currently? Is it zero? I mean, in the beginning, it was essentially, there wasn't much going on in terms of views, right? We had a few people using things on a daily basis, but it was very it's kind of new to being used. So we knew we wanted to grow that over time. What are our information domains here at the Hurricanes, right? Ticket sales, marketing, sponsorship, food and bev, and so forth. There's a number of information domains that we pull from that are relative to that data flow, right? So wherever those sources are coming from creates kind of an information domain around that department. How do we achieve buy-in, and from who, right? Executive managerial sponsors, and what kind of approach do we take? A top-down or bottom-up approach? Where do we have low-hanging fruit, quick wins? What works currently? And then what are our top KPIs, right? And all of this is essentially, when you look at business intelligence and analytics in any organization, no matter the industry, what's really at the heart of everything that will drive adoption? And it's trust in it, right? It's trust is at the heart of BI analytics. If you can't grow trust around your data and your information, it's not going to succeed over time. So that's the first thing we wanted to do, is get our foundation under our feet so that we can scale up with trust at the core. So from there, we go into an adoption campaign kickoff, right? So we're taking a bottom-up approach here because we have a great department that we've identified that can be our early adopters to our business intelligence adoption, right? So we're targeting ticket sales, and I want to ask a question to the audience. Why do you think we decided on ticket sales as the department of choice in this? So what would a ticket sales department? I don't know if anybody has a kind of an understanding of what a ticket sales department looks like in a sports business organization, but why would we look at ticket sales as an early adopter? Let's see if there's anybody. So data is cleaner, churn. Those are good answers. How about, so here they need to know what it isn't working on the marketing side. That's true, Roshni. So those are all great, and those all played a part, right, in what we are looking at, right? We had data that we already had validated sources on, were vetted, were being pulled through our warehouse, and so we can take that and run with it off the bat. But also, ticket sales has a lot of young people, right? People that are just out of college, a lot of technical, they might be more technically savvy, and so they're willing to learn, right? They're very eager to learn BI. They're already used to kind of a lot of graphics. And so they were really easy to kind of get in the door and build a solution for ticket sales, managers and staff. And so they were a very good target department to kick off our adoption campaign. So ticket sales, so from here, I'm gonna kind of pivot and show you guys some ticket sales dashboard demos that we have kind of built over the last month. So the last 30 days, these workbooks have been developed to aid in our ticket sales operations and understanding how they're tracking their sales, their revenue, capacity in each game, and they're broken out into two segments. One's just a ticket sales tracker for by individual staff member and team view, and then there's an arena overview, right? Hurricanes, we play here at PNC Arena, and so we have to we want to make sure we are doing our best to fill the house and get fans out for our games so we can have the best environment possible. So PNC Arena overview and game summary, what has been our recent build and go live. So I'll just pivot over real quick. Let me know if you can see kind of, I developed a new project in our server that is just for today. It's a KC Tug. So the first one I'll show is kind of our ticket sales tracker. That all this data in here is for demo purposes, so it's not real. It's dummy data, but this is exactly how it kind of looks in our server. If you know anything about hockey, these are actually our players that I've put in. So these are all of our. You can see Tony D'Angelo doing a tremendous job in ticket sales over the last 3 months. It's a great job to him. But this is our kind of our team view that allows them to see by department and job category how well they compare to their peers in their department, right? Ticket sales is very competitive. They like to have ticket leaderboards, and they have power hours, and they do all this kind of cool stuff in there to be competitive, so they can really do a great job each year in getting fans to come to our arena. So, right, we looked at KPIs that we kind of look at every day: revenue, tickets sold, and a full season equivalent, and then activity, right? What they are using in our systems in terms of phone calls, emails, how are they contacting our fan base? These are the KPIs that we focused on because we already had kind of vetted sources for them, and they allow us to really get an understanding of how well our ticket sales team is doing on a day-to-day basis. So this is kind of the team view that they see, and then an individual view here on the second tab is going to show kind of more of an in-depth view of each individual staff member, right? So let's say I wanted to pick Nino Niederreiter, right? One of our great players here. Look at Nino, and we actually have some cool things here. I have some, like, for instance, the hometown, you can have their little map in the back, but yeah, it kind of really just gives them more of an independent or individual view of their sales and revenue and activity for any date range throughout the year and season. So this is something that they've really kind of latched onto and has given them kind of an enablement to and also a tool for them to really be able to show their managers, like, this is what I'm doing. Like, I'm doing a great, all these phone calls and emails, and it's a tool for them as well, not just for the managers. So it's really been a great kind of adoption for this. To give the sales teams more control over their and kind of show how well they're doing on a day-to-day basis. So this is their individual and team view for the ticket sales tracker. And going back, now I'll show the arena view, which is something that I really like because it involves polygons in Tableau, right? You have your arena map here with section data and tickets sold by section, capacity used, revenue generated. And again, these are all this is all dummy data that I've put underneath to show the actual numbers, but the games and the seasons are all right. This is all exactly what's happening this year in terms of game by game. But it gives our sales managers the ability to filter on each individual game and get an idea of what our capacity, our tickets sold, our revenue for each game. And this is really helpful for us to really see, what sections do we need to target, and which fans might be the best suitable for buying tickets in certain parts of the arena. And it's been really well received, and we're going to continue to build off of this information, with additional KPIs and additional tabs and so forth. So this is the first overview page of the arena. Like I said, everything has kind of drill in tooltips, very nice Tableau functionality, right? Details on demand. This is what we expect in today's BI solutions, as much information as you possibly can get on a page without overblowing your mind. You want them to be able to really be able to utilize the page and the white space that it provides, but give them the ability to not have to utilize that many clicks to get the information they need, right? Lessen the clicks, more, give them the information they need, as fast as possible. Obviously, and add filters wherever necessary. So this is their overview. And then on the second page is a game by game one, which goes out every morning. Again, this is all dummy data, but this goes out every morning, and this has been really powerful, right? This gives us day by day updates of tickets sold, which games are heating up, which games need action, which games are ice cold, meaning no one's buying, or no one's coming to that game, or we're seeing a slowdown in that game. We need to look into, maybe trying to discount tickets or whatever possible. We're trying to strategize on getting, providing the best fan experience to our Arcaniacs here in our region. And so this game by game has been awesome. And, and you can kind of do, if you wanted to change your days, you can go back 3 days and kind of see how data changes over, kind of over a weekly basis. Are things trending in the wrong direction and so forth. But generally, this gives you a nice overview every morning. It goes out at 8 a.m. To our managers on how well our season is doing in terms of capacity, used, tickets sold, and revenue generated. Those are our focus KPIs off this initial ticket sales adoption campaign. Obviously, we're going to continue to grow. It's only been 1 month since we've developed all this stuff, but we have a lot at our disposal, and we're really excited for what's to come. So let me go back to my presentation just to finish off what we need to, just to finish off our demo. So our last kind of piece that I just want to touch on is just some of our future plans here at the Hurricanes, right? We have, we've done a lot over the last 30 days. We can do a lot more over the next 30 days and into throughout the season. One of the biggest things that we're hoping is to kind of nail down is we're currently exploring a new CRM and marketing solution. So that's really exciting. So that's going to kind of lay the foundation for all future reporting and how data is managed, and it's going to be incredible for us when we get that going. So it's a really big opportunity for us at the Hurricanes to modernize our infrastructure. We have some plans for new data source integrations in a variety of our information domains. I mentioned bypass and email marketing. So those are different segments of our business. So we're trying to, as many sources that we can integrate into our warehouse allows us greater access to that data so that we can do any transformation that we need custom or, just as much data as we have at our disposal so that we can automate and provide our company the best reporting possible. And to obviously lessen their administrative burden, if they're doing any manual Excel reporting, right? That's kind of low-hanging fruit in any business. When the department's doing manual Excel reporting, that's where Tableau should be able to step in and kind of automate it for them, so they don't have to spend 15 minutes a day. They can do it themselves, or Tableau can kind of run refreshes for them. And so at the end, obviously further development of Tableau reporting and embedded analytics across all information domains, right? This is what, we're going to continue to do, using Tableau as a centerpiece of our BI, solutions here. And we have a lot we can do. And, so we're really excited for the future here at the Hurricanes. And the last piece there is also team growth. So we're hoping we're able to continue to grow. And if anybody is interested in moving out to Raleigh, or wants to keep in touch in terms of future openings, definitely do so. The business of sports is growing and has been growing for the last few years, especially hopefully the pandemic is just kind of slowing down, and we can kind of really ramp up. But the business of sports, the outlook is tremendous, and so if anybody's really interested, definitely stay in touch with us. And so that's it. So does anybody have any questions for us? This is our contact information if you want to reach out afterwards, and stay in touch. But with that, does anybody have any questions for Vince and I?
Chris, there's a question on chat from Jay. Is the team using or planning to use any Tableau analysis from player stat sources to assist coaches, managers, and players selections for key situations like maximizing opportunities for offense, defense, killing the clock, etc.?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So in sports, there are actually like two separate sides, right? There's the business of sports, and then there's player intelligence, right? In hockey, it's called hockey intelligence. We kind of have a split where Vince and I are more on the business side. So we deal with a lot of arena operations, ticket sales, marketing, anything that's tailored to the business. And then the other side is player intelligence, where we have other data scientists and analysts that do specifically draft analysis, hockey intelligence, player stats, that kind of stuff. So, but yeah, we do that in-house, and every organization does, and it's typically by that kind of, there's a sports business analysts and business intelligence analysts, and then there's your hockey intelligence or player intelligence analysts that do more player-specific reporting.
And one of the great things I'll add to this is our team is like a very strong adopter of analytics. I know that there's some teams that kind of do things in a more old-fashioned way, more focused on scouting and in person, looking at the players play and really nothing but that. But our the person who's head up our hockey analytics department, he's actually been promoted to the assistant GM in the last couple of years. So they're obviously finding, a lot of use in the analytics that team does. So it's kind of cool to see analytics driving value and, hopefully putting a better product on the ice, which I think we've seen in the last couple of years. So it's really great to see that happen.
Awesome. Another question that came through was whether the team is looking at doing predictions as well, maybe leveraging Tableau for that, for ticket sales.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, we're very early on in our adoption. A lot of what we do right now is more descriptive and analytics, which is kind of how you start to see in most essential startup analytics departments. But absolutely, I mean, we want to move into more prescriptive and predictive analytics down the road. I mean, Vince has a history in economics. They do forecasting. So we want to utilize his skill sets here and try to get it once we get our foundation under us, especially after our, future CRM implementation and all that. We're definitely going to dive into more advanced analytics here, and try to get as much as we possibly can out of our information and data. So, so that we can make, the best decisions possible for, especially next season upcoming. This season, we're rolling into what we have, but next season, I would say look out. I think we're gonna have a lot at our disposal for us.
Awesome. Well, good stuff, guys. I appreciate your sharing it with us today. Same for you, Roshni. I hope. I mean, I know I got quite a bit. I just wish to the point that Keith made. Back to you, Roshni, was that we were given more time maybe to implement a lot of those tests. We live in under one of those go environments, which sometimes you don't have that that ability, but a lot to take in and share, especially within our team here. So very good, and also great stuff to see how you guys are using Tableau today, Chris and Vince. So really appreciate that. Erin, any last comments from you? before
No,
we wrap
just
this
thank
up?
you guys all for such wonderful presentations. I got like a whole page of notes here, so many ideas from both of you. And we just so appreciate you being willing to share with our community. And I know it, it takes up your time. It takes time to prep. None of this happens immediately. And so we really, we appreciate you joining us. And, to the broader Casey Tug community, we've still got 3 months left. We're going into Q4. And we're in the process of planning those events. We've got a steering committee meeting later this week. So we really do sincerely mean, if you have questions, ideas, topics you want to see covered, people you want to see speak. I mean, if there's someone specific out there, some Zen master or some organization that you really want, I mean, MIT and the NHL, those are pretty great people to have speaking to our group. So if you've got, kind of dream speakers like this that you'd like to hear, send them our way and we will reach out. The worst thing that can happen is they say no or they say nothing. So whatever you really want to hear, I mean, this is, like Sean always says, this is your tug. So let us know what we can do for you.
Okay.
And just keep an eye out.
Hey, we don't have an NHL team, so I
for the
feel like
next session.
we're up.
You guys
it's kind of
are
like,
already fans now. You guys have to be fans of it. I mean,
yeah, it's like St. Louis when the Rams left. I told people like, come on over. We're happy to have you. So
we'll take you.
You guys, Raleigh Midwest.
Exactly.
Right.
Well, thank you guys so much.
Thank you guys
Lucas,
for being with us today.
Hey, it's no pleasure. Thank you so much.
Not for me. I prefer Roshni's selection for pizza, so we'll settle that at the end of our tug. So thank you guys very much, and
Pizza
we'll
fight.
probably meet either in October or November here coming soon.
Great.
Bye, everybody.
Thanks.
Thanks. Appreciate it.
Thanks, everyone.